Halfland, an ahistorical prehistory. Part 22. The Lady and the Exile. In the 164th year of the Common Reckoning, Scalfin, the one-time war earl of the Eastland, fled the armies of the victorious Ulfkill and arrived at the hall of Ingildrifa, the Lady of Unnaskrag. Ingildrifa was sitting on her throne, reading a letter. Beside her sat Bina, her grandson. A serving wench brought him a dish of apples. Bina examined them carefully and took an apple that was to his liking. Then he smiled at the girl and waved her away. Ingildrifa looked up as Scalfin approached her. "What a coincidence," she said. "Here you are, and here is a message from Ulfkill, demanding that I send him your head, among other things. War clouds are gathering in the north, and it seems that a storm is going to break upon us. What do you say to that?" Scalfin knelt before Ingildrifa and laid his axe at her feet. "This is all I can offer," he said, "but I will use it to fight for you, to fight against Ulfkill, and there are other dwarves in the Eastland who will do likewise." "Is that so?" asked Ingildrifa. "And which dwarves would those be? The craven dwarves who fled from the field at your side while their fellows fought on? The cringing cowards who eagerly bend the knee to Ulfkill? The fighting dwarves of the Eastland are all dead. The carrion birds of Firfell feast on their corpses. The wise know when a battle is lost, and save their strength for another day, rather than foolishly throwing their lives away in a lost cause," replied Scalfin. "And the faint of heart do not fight at all," retorted Ingildrifa. "Has an army of wise and valiant warriors marched here with you? No, you have come alone. But your wife Freydis is of my kin. I will welcome you under my roof, whatever the cost may be, and I accept your offer of service, and the service of any who may follow you in due course. But I put no great faith in the dwarves of Eastland." Scalfin bowed his head. "I serve you gladly," he said, "and maybe events will change your opinion of my countryfolk in time." "Maybe," said Ingildrifa. "Let us hope so. But in the meantime I will seek succour elsewhere." Scalfin withdrew. Ingildrifa turned to Bina. "What say you?" she asked. Bina shrugged. "Would Ulfkill be satisfied with Scalfin's head alone?" he asked. "No," said Ingildrifa, "but he might manage without it if I swore fealty to the hillhold and paid an annual tribute." "And are you minded to do so?" asked Bina. "No," said Ingildrifa, "I will not relinquish my sovereignty and your inheritance." She gestured to the painting on the wall behind her, a painting of a younger her, armoured and battle-stained. "Over 30 years ago I led my people to war and victory," she said. "Since then we have been blessed with peace. But I will lead them to war again if needs be." "You may lead," observed Bina, "but will they follow?" "The war will come to them," said Ingildrifa. "They will fight to defend their land, and maybe others can be persuaded to fight at their side, or paid to do so." "So be it," said Bina. "There is gold in the treasury. Now seems to be a good time to spend it." Ingildrifa got busy. The merchants of Unnaskrag traded extensively with the halflings on the south bank of the Silver Stream. Soon it was known in Hamfistum, Muffins, and Elmgrove that the Lady of Unnaskrag would pay good money to any halfling willing to fight for her. Now, halflings are generally peaceable folk, but a number of younger halflings who were seeking excitement, or who had fallen on hard times, made their way to Unnaskrag and took up Ingildrifa's offer. The other significant trading partner of Unnaskrag was Cadamos. Here Ingildrifa took a different approach. There was considerable animosity between Cadamos and New Lixia, and Ingildrifa suggested that if Cadamos provided troops to assist her in defending Unnaskrag, she would reciprocate by providing troops to Cadamos for use against New Lixia. After some discussion about the numbers to be provided in each case, Ingildrifa's proposal was accepted. Next, Ingildrifa sent messengers to Delvings, to her daughter, Ingelfrid, the Mine Lady, suggesting that Ingelfrid send spear dwarfs south to help avenge the death of her husband, Gudric. But Ingelfrid declined her mother's request. Many of the Mine Lady's spear dwarfs had perished at Fir Fell, and the others were needed at home, and Ingelfrid was still bitter that Ingildrifa had not supported Gudric's claim to operate the mines in the Dark Hills. Unbeknown to Ingildrifa, she was also terminally ill. Ingildrifa sent no messages to the Geitsmark. She wanted no dealings with the House of Norby. But at Geitsbin, King Halfred was building an army of his own, ready to defend his realm, or extend it, as circumstances might permit. A trickle of dwarves made their way to Unnaskrag from the Eastland to fight for Ingildrifa under Scalfin's banner, but not very many. In the spring of the 165th year of the Common Reckoning, having received no response to his demands, Ulfkill determined to make good his threats and marched his army toward Unnaskrag. His path ran along the valley known as Greydale, and here it was that he found Ingildrifa and her patchwork army of assorted dwarves, halflings and men awaiting him. The resulting battle was hard fought, but at its height, Scalfin led the dwarves of the Eastland in a desperate charge against Ulfkill's shield wall and swept it aside. Ulfkill was surrounded, overwhelmed and slain. Thus Scalfin proved his point, and thus the defeat of Fir Fell was avenged. The dwarves of the Dark Hills retreated back the way they had come, leaving Ulfkill's battered corpse behind them. Ingildrifa pursued them, cautiously, at a distance. Her army was much reduced in numbers, both due to the casualties it had suffered, and because the Cadamosians did not join her. They had only agreed to fight in defence of Unnaskrag and nothing more, and having fulfilled their promise, they headed for home. What was left of Ulfkill's army straggled back to the Hillhold, and so it was that Ulfgrim, the king of the dwarves of the Dark Hills, learned of the death of his son and heir. Anticipating that a belligerent Ingildrifa would soon be at his gates, Ulfgrim gathered provisions and what troops he could within the Hillhold, and prepared to be besieged. But Ingildrifa did not march on the Hillhold. She instead headed east into the Dark Hills, where she took control of the mines. She then sent Ulfgrim an ultimatum. If he wanted peace, he must sign over the mines to Bina and his heirs, on the same terms as he had previously signed them over to Bardi, and he must renounce any claim to rule over or collect taxation from both Unnaskrag and the Eastland. Ingildrifa's proposal was not unreasonable. The reality was that Ulfgrim had lost control of both the mines and the Eastland, and had never had control of Unnaskrag and, rather than exploiting her strong situation to extract the maximum advantage, Ingildrifa was only proposing a return to the position of a few years previously, a position that Ulfgrim had at that time considered to be perfectly satisfactory. But under Ulfkill's management, the mines had generated an income for the crown that was considerably higher than the annual fee that Bardi had paid, and the tax revenue from the Eastland was a welcome source of additional funds that Ulfgrim was reluctant to forego. Ulfgrim liked an easy life, but he also liked gold, and he grieved over the death of Ulfkill. Maybe he should reject Ingildrifa's offer and instead march out to meet her in battle, to maintain his current cash flow and avenge his son. But Ulfgrim and Ingildrifa were not the only players in the game. Even as Ulfgrim considered his options, news of Ulfkill's defeat at Greydale reached Halfred, the king of the Geitsmark. Sensing an opportunity to strike at a time when his enemy was weakened, Halfred started to muster his spear dwarves with the intention of marching on the Hillhold. Learning of this, Ulfgrim abandoned any thought of confronting Ingildrifa on the battlefield. That would be to abandon the Hillhold to Halfred. Possession of the Hillhold would provide Halfred with a secure base from which he could make attacks into the Dark Hills. Ulfgrim might take the mines back from Ingildrifa, but, under those circumstances, would he then be able to defend them from Halfred? It seemed unlikely. On the other hand, if Ulfgrim sat tight, he was confident that he could defend the Hillhold against Halfred virtually indefinitely. And if Bina controlled the mines, then any attack on the Dark Hills by Halfred would be an attack on Bina, which would incur Ingildrifa's wrath. Ulfgrim had a high opinion of Ingildrifa's military prowess, nearly as high as her own, and he found the thought of an infuriated Ingildrifa frenziedly falling upon his foes to be rather reassuring. So Ulfgrim accepted Ingildrifa's proposals, hunkered down in the Hillhold, and waited for Halfred to make a move. And Halfred did make a move. The morning after concluding his treaty with Ingildrifa, Ulfgrim awoke to find Halfred's army on his doorstep. Ulfgrim only just had time to send an urgent message to Ingildrifa and lock the gates, before the Hillhold was surrounded and isolated by a hostile force. 2 days later, Ulfgrim's hastily scrawled letter was in Ingildrifa's hands. She read it and passed it to Bina. "What do you think of that?" she asked. Bina perused the document before him. "Easy come, easy go," he said. "I don't want to fight for Ulfgrim. I say we leave them to fight it out, abandon the mines, and head back home." "That is because you are young and foolish," said Ingildrifa. "If Halfred is victorious, do you think he will stop there? How long do you think Unnaskrag would stand against the combined strength and riches of the Geitsmark and the Dark Hills? No, we must go to Ulfgrim's aid, as I did over 30 years ago, and hope that history repeats itself." Ingildrifa turned to Scalfin. "You promised to fight for me against Ulfkill," she said, "and you have certainly done so. But I have more fighting to do. Will you fight for me against Halfred? Or, having fulfilled your promise, will you lead your retinue back to the Eastland? No doubt they will make you king, although the crown may not sit on your head for long, should Halfred's dream of conquest turn eastward." Scalfin bowed. "I do not wish to be a king," he said, and nor do I wish to be ruled by one, or indeed by a queen. I wish to be left in peace, to grow my grain and shear my sheep. That is what I have been fighting for. I would that the fighting were done. But you have treated me fairly, and should he win the victory, I do not trust Halfred to do so. I will fight for you, as you ask. Ingildrifa marched her army down from the dark hills toward the hill-hold. Halfred split his force in two, leaving half of his army to besiege the hill-hold, while he led the other half forth to meet her. A battle was fought at Wolfswade on the Skratterbeck. Ingildrifa won the victory. Halfred was slain by the spears of Ingildrifa's guard, and his force fled the field. Ingildrifa marched triumphantly to the hill-hold. No one opposed her. Hearing of Halfred's death, the besiegers had broken camp and headed back to the Geitsmark. But Ingildrifa's celebrations were short-lived. At the hill-hold she learned that her daughter, Ingolfrid the Mine Lady, had died at the turn of the year. Although she was only in her 30s, Ingolfrid had been unwell for some time, and the death of Gudric had hit her hard. Although Ingildrifa and Ingolfrid had fallen out over the mines in the Dark Hills, Ingildrifa was much grieved by her daughter's death, and concerned for Ingolfrid's 4 children. The eldest of these was Gunny, who inherited the mines of Silvermere, and thus became the mine lord. He was 10 years old. Scalfin returned to the Eastland, where a third parliament was convened, which offered him the crown. Scalfin declined it. He argued that the Eastlanders had managed very well for many years without a king, and he saw no need to change things. Thus the Eastlanders reverted to the form of government that they had enjoyed prior to Ulfkill's intervention, which is to say, not very much government at all. Meanwhile, Ingildrifa received further tidings of developments at Delvings. Bardi had a nephew named Hundi, the son of Bardi's older brother Siggy, and Hundi was challenging Ingolfrid's will, claiming that the mines should pass to him. The claim was groundless, but Hundi had many friends on the council of guildsmen. Ingildrifa decided that she needed to intervene. She would not stand by while her orphaned grandchild was robbed of his rightful inheritance. She therefore delegated affairs of state to Bina in her absence, and marched north with a small entourage, heading for South Vale, where the legal hearings would take place. Her road ran through the Geitsmark, past the gates of Geitsbin. Given recent events, she was aware that the inhabitants of the Geitsmark might have some antagonism toward her, but she reckoned that in the confusion and upheaval caused by the death of Halfred, she would be able to slip through their territory unopposed. She was mistaken, but that is another story.